how's it going, everybody? My name is Blitzwinger, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for one more Ratchet Clank Rift Apart video. This is going to be the last one for the series, as I promised when I did go on ahead and unlock all the ultimate forms of the weapons. I will do a video showcase for the weapons in the game. We're going to run through most of the details for the weapons in terms of what they look like, what actual functionality they have, how much they cost in order to actually unlock them, how you unlock them, because some of them are just unlocked via actually completing certain tasks instead of actually just using your bolts in the game. So with all that in mind, before we get rock and rolling, I want to ask you guys, of course, if by the end of the video you guys enjoyed the video, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and in addition to that, guys, let me know down in the comment section below, what is your favorite weapon? If it's too difficult to decide just one, give me your top 3 down in the comment section below. With that in mind, let's get rocking and let's get rolling. So first and foremost, we're going to kick things off with the pistol. This is the very first weapon that you get in the game, and just like its name goes, it's a pistol. You actually get this weapon for absolutely free. It's the, well, I guess technically it's the second weapon you get, because you do get the wrench as your first weapon, melee weapon. So I guess as far as ranged weapons are concerned, the pistol will indeed be the first one that you get. Now, again, when you look at the name for the pistol here, when you just unlock it, I believe it's called the burst pistol. Basically, the way that they have it set up in the game is that as you level up a weapon, it will actually change names with each level that you unlock until you reach level 5, which is kind of the capped level cap for the weapons. However, once you go into New Game Plus, you actually can go on ahead and talk to Miss Zircon and purchase ultimate versions of the same weapons, allowing you to actually increase the level cap a further 5 levels to go from level 5 to level 10 as your new cap. Now, the other cool thing that happens with the weapons in this game is that as you go through the game, so for example, here you can see the single shot on the burst pistol or the pistol. But as you go through the game, you'll actually go on ahead and power it up even further, allowing you to get new forms of either damage, effects, the rate of fire, things like that will basically increase. So then you can unlock the triple shot for the pistol, which is pretty awesome. Very, very, very useful to go on ahead and utilize that. Then from there, the next weapon that you're going to get is actually going to be the executor, or I believe, we're just going to say the shotgun. And essentially, as you can see, it's got 2 rates of fire. You have the single shot, or you have the double barrel shot, where it fires a lot wider and is able to do more damage. Now, again, typically speaking, it would be a dual barreled weapon. It is a quadruple barreled weapon because it is all the way powered up. So that's why you have that particular effect there, and you could hear the weapon actually fire 4 times instead of the typical 2 that a shotgun would. From there, by the way, that shotgun weapon would run you 1,250 points. The next weapon that you unlock is actually the Shatter Blast, which is pretty much a grenade weapon. So once you have the an additional 1,250 bolts to spend, then you can go on ahead and grab the grenade weapon. This is probably the least exciting of the early weapons that you unlock. Personally, for me, the next weapon that we're discussing is actually one of my favorites. Could be my favorite in the game just because of how versatile and how useful it is. And that is a Miss Fungal. But I think it actually starts out as, I want to say the original name is Fungi, Mr. Fungi, I want to say, maybe, if I remember correctly. The point is, it's basically a set of assist characters that you can go on ahead and spawn. When you just start out, it's going to be just a single unit, and you could only have 1 unit at a time on the field. As you power this thing up and you get more and more unlocks, you can get to the point of having, as you saw, up to 8 of them at once, which is super duper broken. And the other thing that makes these guys super wonderful is the fact that you can go on ahead and do damage to any enemy type. So whether it is a flying enemy or a melee enemy that is down on the ground, you can battle them all. So they are very, very versatile and super duper useful. So this is one of the weapons that I would definitely recommend to upgrade as fast as possible. And that upgrade, or sorry, this weapon to unlock initially will just cost you 3,000 bolts. And again, I will point out if there's any other specific limitations on how to get the unlock. This one is just unlocked via just play through the game, and eventually this one will pop up as a purchase in the shop. Next up, we have the Collider, which is what I like to call the Iron Man Unibeam. It's a really, really powerful weapon. This is probably the most powerful weapon that you get relatively early on. It will cost you 3,000 points. And it's super duper OP, especially if you power it up a little bit. Its only weakness is the fact that you have pretty low ammo when you just start out, but which I think was maybe 4 blasts. But it is so good. Like, it's insanely powerful, and you're able to keep the beam on an enemy, move it around across multiple enemies to damage multiple enemies at once. Very useful weapon indeed. Next up, we have something that I would more so consider a defensive tool, and this is the Topiary Sprinkler, which will run you 4,000 bolts. And basically the way that these things work is they pop up and they will go on ahead and target enemies. As they spot enemies, the enemies then are covered in kind of overgrowth plants, sort of, and they can't move. So it freezes enemies in place. You should be careful about which word I use there, because technically there's a weapon that literally freezes enemies in place, but it basically plants enemies in place, not allowing them to move for a temporary moment. So that's really useful for when you're getting overwhelmed by a lot of enemy units. If you just need a little bit of peace and quiet and be like, okay, I'm going to fight these couple of enemies here, please stop attacking me, you could drop a Topiary Sprinkler, and it will give you a little bit of cover. So again, really useful weapon indeed. And again, as you upgrade it, you can indeed have multiples of them available at once, taking down or giving you coverage in multiple areas. With that in mind, the next weapon that we're going to take a look at is one that I thought was going to be insanely good. Then as the walkthrough went on, I was like, this is kind of a terrible weapon. But then I came back around and realized that it's actually pretty decent, especially once you upgrade it, and that is the Ricocheting Blaster, which basically the way that it functions is it fires one blast, and then once it's locked in on a target, it will ping pong the target over and over again with a multitude of damage. The key with this weapon is that you have to keep tapping the R2 button. Do not just hold the R2 button, because then the damage output will be really slow. If you tap the R2 button like quickly, if you, I guess, button mash a little bit, it becomes a pretty useful weapon. And this one actually will run you 6,500 points. So as you can see, things are starting to get more and more pricey. This right here is the Lightning Blaster, which again was one of the weapons that seemed very useful in theory, but then as I went through the game, I kind of realized it wasn't really all that useful as I thought it was. It's still kind of handy when you're, for example, battling like the amoeboids, because basically the functionality of this one is that it doesn't do all that much damage, but the bright side that it does offer is actually that it creates a chain of enemies getting electrocuted. So if you hit one target, but he has a couple of enemies next to him, it will start shocking those other enemies as well, dealing damage to them. Plus, it also freezes them in place as they're getting electrocuted. So it is useful in some scenarios. It's just that for the bigger enemies, the output of damage that you have on this is just so slow, and you have such better weapons available to you where you can get through those fights in a lot more of an efficient manner. But this thing will run you 8,000 bolts, so we're starting to really get up there in terms of the price. Now keep in mind, the ultimate versions of all of these weapons are like tens upon hundreds of thousands to unlock, and it sounds like it's difficult, but you have bolt multipliers active in the New Game Plus. Plus, you can go on ahead and turn on the gold bolts where you have invincibility. So it really is not that difficult once you have a set of items unlocked. Now, next up, we have the Drill Hound. This is probably the weapon that I had used the most early on in the game. And basically what it does, as you can see, is it launches a drill that goes underground and then pops up from the ground and launches onto the target that you had pointed onto. It's a really powerful weapon. Of course, you can see that I've got it upgraded even further, which actually spawns these two like other minion drills to go along with the drill. Really powerful, super duper useful, similar to the Iron Man Unibeam, and that's why it's the first weapon that will actually require you to spend 5 figures of bolts with 10,000 points to spend on this thing. Next up from there, we have the worst weapon, in my opinion, in the game, and that is the Void Repulsor. This thing will run you about 17,500 points. I really do not like this weapon. I think it's so cumbersome, so slow. I think that it's the least efficient weapon in the game. It has a few different modes. It's basically a shotgun in close range, but it also does give you shields. So again, if you're getting overwhelmed, I suppose it's kind of nice to have the shields. If you get it upgraded enough, it can actually deflect the energy blasts from enemies and projectiles from enemies back at them. So that's kind of nice. But I just feel like both of the things that it does them very poorly, making for one cohesive item that is not all that exciting. So for me, this is probably the worst weapon in the game. I really think that I rarely use this thing. The only times I did use it is to try to get it leveled up, just because I wanted to get to the ultimate weapons form on all of the weapons available in the game. Next up from there, we have another favorite of mine, and that is the Glove of Doom. And again, they will change names. So like now it's the Apocalypse of Doom, or sorry, Glove of Apocalypse, or Apocalypse Glove? Apocalypse Glove. So they will change names as you level them up, but it's the Glove of Doom. That's what it starts out as. And you will need to pay 22,500 bolts for this. Similarly to the fungal enemies that you get to go on ahead and call in, these guys are pretty much assist units. Now the thing that makes them a little bit worse than the fungal ones, there are more of them, so I guess that's kind of an upside, and they do pretty good damage. They actually attack at a pretty good rate, but the problem is they can only fight melee enemies. So as you run into enemies that are up in the air, good luck, because these guys are just going to be running around you doing nothing, because they can't actually hit the enemies that are flying up above. And you will be fighting quite a few enemies that are aerial as well. So unfortunately, that's kind of a down side to these guys. But again, it's still really cool that you can go on ahead and basically assemble your own little robot army that you can bring out and go on ahead and battle just waves after waves of enemies. I mean, look at that. Can you imagine if you run into even a Grunthor? These guys will make quick work of that guy very easily. So from there, we're going to go on ahead and move along to the next item, which will be the Buzz Blades. Now this item is going to go on ahead and set you back 27,500 bolts. And basically what it is just like the lightning rod weapon, but instead it's blades. So it fires wheels of blades, and it wraps your enemy around, trapping them in the damage, constantly getting pinged a multitude of times. But at the same time, if there are enemies close by, they will take damage from the buzzed blades as well. Pretty useful. I think that over time, as I played through the game, it actually became kind of more of my favorite version of the lightning rod. I think it just does what the lightning rod does a little bit better, with a little bit of a higher rate of fire and a bit more damage. Next up from there, we have the Cold Snap, which, as I was saying before, is a nice way for you to freeze your foes. Now, this thing doesn't actually deal any damage when you fire it, so it's, I think, the only weapon actually in the game that does that, where it doesn't do any damage on contact. It just puts your enemies in an ice block, but then if you hit the enemy who is frozen, it will accentuate the damage, delivering far greater damage to those foes. So it's a really useful item. The only downside of this thing is the fact that it only has 4 shots, even in the upgraded state that I have it at. So obviously that's a bit of a bummer, but it's still a super duper useful weapon and will come in handy in many occasions. Now, next up from there, we have probably the most powerful single shot weapon, I want to say, and that is the Peacemaker, or the Warmonger. This will run you 30,000 points. It's basically an RPG. That's it. Like, really simply put, it fires rockets one at a time, dealing a lot of damage to whatever target it hits, plus AoE damage around the target. Super duper handy, very powerful weapon, and probably the most useful weapon in the big giant boss fights of the game, just because the enemies are huge, and so you're not really worried about actually hitting your target. You just hit anywhere on the enemy and you'll be dealing damage. Next up from there, we have the Bombardier, which is going to be the Bomb Voyage. At least that's what it's called. It basically spawns like a little drone that will deal damage in a straight line as it spawns. It's okay. Again, this was one of the weapons that I thought was going to be insanely powerful, but turned out to be kind of underwhelming, even with a lot of upgrades unlocked for it. It turned out to be kind of a meh type weapon. Next up from there, and by the way, that will set you back 25,000 bolts. Next up, we have the Headhunter, which is pretty much a sniper. So you have both a non-scoped fire as well as a scope shot, and you can go on ahead and charge your shots on this. Obviously, if you hit a headshot on the enemy, it's going to do more damage than if you hit a torso shot, etc. So pretty self-explanatory. Looks pretty cool too. Very much a Nerf gun sort of feel to this thing. And that one will set you back 40,000 bolts. Next up from there, we have the Black Hole Vortex, or the Black Hole Storm, which is a Gatling gun or a minigun. It's really fun to use, especially if you're getting overwhelmed by just the sheer number of enemies. Like if there's a lot of smaller enemies spawning at once, this thing will absolutely shred right through them. This is a weapon that you get very late in the game. I think it might be the last weapon that you get in your first playthrough. So this is the Black Hole Storm. Pretty good though. Definitely pretty good. Next up after that, we have the Rhino. Now, the Rhino is actually earned via collecting all 10 spy bots in the game. So once you've successfully done that, you can then go on ahead and utilize this weapon, which is super cool because basically what it does is it calls in items from different dimensions and then drops them down on a set area. When you just started out with the first unlock, it will actually just spawn in for just one item and pretty basic items like smaller scale. As you level it up, it will spawn in things from Horizon Forbidden West. It will spawn in Uncharted, the Jeep from Uncharted. It will spawn in Sully's plane from Uncharted. It's really cool because it actually has a ton of Easter eggs that it goes into spawning with this dimensional rift system, and you'll see them drop in onto your enemies. You'll recognize some things, like for example right there, that was Sly Cooper's van. Like how cool is that? So you'll see a bunch of really cool things getting spawned in with a ton of cool Easter eggs as well. So this is a really fun weapon and definitely a nice reward for going through all the trouble of collecting 10 spy bots. Now, the next two weapons here are the Pixelizer and the Heavy Bouncer. These are each unlocked via going into New Game Plus, or if you got the launch edition of the game, then you actually do get the Pixelizer HD early, or I guess you can enter the code and unlock it early. And so you'd be able to utilize it before you actually go into New Game Plus. But typically speaking, it's basically the shotgun weapon that we've seen before, which there's technically kind of two different variations for, but it's basically that weapon. Although not only does it fire the shot, it actually goes on ahead and turns enemies into more of a pixelized form. So that's really the distinct feature for that one. Kind of a bit of an underwhelming one for sure, especially for like late game. But the Heavy Bouncer, on the other hand, is super awesome because it's basically the grenade launcher, but it splits off into, so you get like the initial contact from the explosion and then the multitude of extra smaller grenades that pop off from it. It's a really useful weapon and something that does a ton of damage. So there you guys have it. That is the showcase of the complete weapons wheel in Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Let me know what you guys thought. What was your favorite weapon? Let me know down in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Oh, and another quick point, the Pixelizer and the Bouncer are each 1 bolt. So again, they're really pretty much rewards for going into New Game Plus. Thanks all for watching, guys. Don't forget to smash the thumbs up button. If you guys can support the channel by becoming a member, you have a link for that down in the description. You can also grab some merch featuring the Blitzbot. Thank you so very much for watching. I will hopefully get you guys here next time. Peace out. See you later, alligators.